Hi everybody, it's Claudia from Create with Claudia, and today is all about half square triangles. So stick around, I'm going to show you 3 different ways to make more than one at one time. Like I said in the intro, today is all about half square triangles. They are absolutely, hands down, my all-time favorite unit in quilting. I make a ton of them. I really love making them. They're very relaxing to me. I know that's not the case for everybody. Believe me, it's fun to compare notes with other quilters on their likes and dislikes, and not everybody likes them. But for some reason, I love them. In fact, I do a talk to guilds and quilt shops all over that's called Happiness is a Half Square Triangle. And I've done a video that shows a time-lapse video with 27 different half square triangle layouts. And then I also did a free quilt pattern using half square triangles. So you can kind of tell that I love them. I use them in a lot of my quilt patterns too. But today I'm going to show you 3 different methods for making more than one at a time. You can make them 2 at a time, 4 at a time, and 8 at a time. There are other methods too, but these are the 3 that I'm going to show you today. And I love each one of them. Each one has a little bit of a different, pros and cons. It's totally up to you. I'm also going to give you measurements for different cuts that you're going to need to make to get the different sizes for unfinished half square triangles. They really are easy. And again, they are just such a great building block, or they stand great on their own too. The fabric that I'm using today is part of a haul video that I'm getting ready to do. I am actually over on Whatnot now. I do buy and I sell over there. And they gave me some money to do a haul video, and wait until you see the fabric I got. You can get some great deals over on Whatnot. It's an online auction site. So if you're not familiar with it or you're interested, I do have a referral link in the description of my video. You get a $15 credit towards your purchase, which is pretty good. And if you're interested in selling over there, you can apply and you can use my referral link for that. And you can go over there and see if you want to sell. I know that I will be doing a lot of destashing over there. However, I also did a lot of shopping. So the fabric that I'm using is really pretty and I really love it. I got a couple of fat quarters along with lots of other fabric. Don't get me wrong, but the fabric that I'm using today is from that haul. So let's get started. We're going to start with the 2 at a time method. Then we'll go to the 4 at a time, and then we'll end up with the 8 at a time. So the first method I'm going to show you is 2 at a time, and I really love this method. This is actually my favorite method of making half square triangles. I don't know if it's maybe because I've done it all my life, or all my quilting life, I should say, but I just find it easy, and quite honestly, I find it a little relaxing because I love trimming up the half square triangles. And believe me, I know that's not everybody's favorite. So I have a square cut, and I'm going to give you some dimensions as well. When you make 2 at a time, and I'll give you my little caveat here, I like giving a little extra wiggle cutting room. I have problems with my right hand, so I like to have a little bit of wiggle room when I'm cutting. I'm not the best rotary cutter. So you will find, and you'll see that when I make this one for you, but to make 2 at a time, the rule of thumb is you take your unfinished square, at least my rule of thumb is your unfinished square. So let's say you want, in my case, today I'm making an 8.5 inch unfinished half square triangle. I would add a 1/2 inch to the 8.5, and I would cut a 9-inch square, or 2 9-inch squares, excuse me, to make your half square triangle, because that half square triangle again is split into 2 fabrics. So in this case, I'm using this fabric, and then I've lined it up on top of this fabric, this really pretty sort of minty green. And I have to tell you about these fabrics. I love these fabrics. These are I bought these at an auction on Whatnot. I now buy and sell on Whatnot, and so they gave me a little bit of money to go shopping so I could do a haul video, which I'm doing this will probably be my next video, is my haul video of Whatnot fabrics. But I had to use these for this one. I just had to show you with the pretty fabrics I got. In this case, these were 2 fat quarters I got. They match really nicely. Love that. See that sort of mint green matches there. It's almost like a greenish turquoise. And I thought this would be perfect for my half square triangle video. So basically what I'm going to do is I cut these. I actually lay them up, press them together, and then cut my squares. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. I'm going to draw a diagonal line on the back of, I'm going to do it on this one just so you can see it better. So I have my marking tool, and hopefully you'll be able to see this okay. You're going to draw a diagonal line, and this again is the 2 at a time half square triangle method. And I'm just going to draw a diagonal line. I'm using a water-soluble, this is a marking pencil. And I'm using white. Sometimes I'll use pencil, although I don't recommend that because I can't get that out of my fabric. But a lot of times that's all I have on hand here in my the studio where I tape. So there you go. Hopefully, yeah, you can see that on camera. I have this monitor which really helps me out. So basically you draw that diagonal line from corner to corner, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch, let me get a pointer here, a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance along both sides of that line. You don't want to sew on the drawn line. You want to sew a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side, excuse me. So I'm going to do that right now, and then you'll see how this turns into a half square triangle. Actually, it turns into 2 half square triangles. All right, so there you can see, hopefully, I tried to use a lighter thread. I always end up using the wrong color thread when I'm doing these videos. But there you can see how I sewed down each side of that line, that drawn line, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The next thing I'm going to do is take my rotary cutter and my ruler, and you need a nice long one for this big one. And again, this method translates to any size half square triangle that you want. So you're going to put your ruler right on that drawn line, and you are just going to split this in half. Like so. And then I'm just going to quickly press these, and I'll bring them right back, and you'll see what they look like, and then we're going to trim them down. All right, so here are the half square triangles pressed. I pressed towards this green color in my case, but here they are. They still need to be pressed down. Remember, we're making 8.5 inch square half square triangles, and I'll tell you again the rule of thumb in a second, and then I'll give you a little rundown of what size you need to cut the fabric squares to get the certain size, to get various sizes of your half square triangles, sort of the more popular sizes, I should say. But before we do that, we need to trim some half square triangles down. So you need your ruler, and I cannot live without my square ruler. It has a diagonal line. Maybe you can see it better like this. It's sort of hard to see. There's a diagonal line and it's square, and this, for cutting half square triangles, for me is just sort of a necessity in my opinion. Now, for some people, there are all kinds of tools out there though you can use, and there's some really great ones. So the first thing you want to do is you want to square off this edge, this top right edge. So I go as far as I can to trim that up, because that's going to give me some nice room on the other edge. Put my fingers down, watch your fingers. So you've squared off, that's going to be your starting corner then to get that perfect 8.5 inch square. You can see I didn't cut off very much fabric there, so I'm just going to push that aside. I'm going to flip this around, and then let me move this down a little bit. There we go. Now, this is where this is so necessary. You're going to find your 8.5 inch mark here, follow it down and find it on that diagonal line. And where that 8.5 inch mark is on that diagonal line, you're going to put that right in that corner that you just squared off and cut. And then you're going to make sure that you're lined up along here, and along here. And I always take a little bit of time, and then you're going to trim this other side off. And there you go. So you can see I didn't trim a whole lot of fabric off. There's your perfect 8.5 inch half square triangle. And I'm going to do with this other one really quickly so I can just finish it up. Alrighty, so here are my 2 half square triangles. They've cut. These are 8.5 inches. And now I'm going to put a diagram up on screen that'll tell you just a few of the more popular half square triangle unfinished measurements. And again, these are unfinished, which means they haven't been sewn into a quilt top or whatever you're going to use them for. Because if you use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, the finished size for this one, for example, it's unfinished 8.5 inches, it would be 8 inches finished. And finished just means it's already put into another quilt top or a quilt block or a pillow or whatever you sew. Okay, so these are all to get unfinished half square triangles. So for if you want a 1.5 inch, 1.5 inch square unfinished triangle, you're going to cut 2 squares, 2 inches. 2 inch unfinished, you're going to cut 2 squares, 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches, you're going to cut a 3 inch squares, 2 3 inch squares. 3 inch unfinished, cut 2 squares, 3.5 inches. 3.5 inches, you're going to cut your squares 4 inches. 4 inches unfinished, you want to cut your squares 4.5 inches. 4.5 inches, you're going to cut your squares 5 inches. 5 inch unfinished, you're going to cut your squares 5.5 inches. 5.5 inches unfinished, you're going to cut your squares 6 inches. 6 inches unfinished, you're going to cut your squares 6.5 inches. And 6.5 inches unfinished, you're going to cut your squares 7 inches. I mean, you kind of get the idea there. You're just going to add a 1/2 inch to your unfinished size that you desire. Now, if you're a subscriber to me, you know that a lot of times I actually add 3/4 of an inch on. There is a little bit of waste on that. But again, I mentioned before, I have problems with my right hand. I have like a progressive issue with this hand. So it's getting harder and harder for me to cut. So I like to have that extra sort of wiggle room. But this also gives you a little bit of wiggle room. Here again are the trimmings, so you can see how much extra there is. There isn't a whole lot, but there's enough that if I were to slip, it would be okay. And most people don't like to use quite as much fabric as I do when I'm cutting. So that's why I'm giving you these measurements of just adding on that extra 1/2 inch. And they work out perfectly every time. The next method I'm going to show you is making them 4 at a time, which is really nice because if you need a lot of them, you can up the number you make it all at once. Here again is that gorgeous fabric I got on Whatnot. I'm telling you, the deals are to be had over there on this, and I will be showing you some of those deals, or actually all of the deals I got in a future video on my haul. The first thing you're going to do, like the other one, you're going to line these up right sides together. There's the right, it's sort of hard on the solid to see, but you get the idea. And then on this one, the right side of this, line them up nice and neatly. And on this one, get my seam ripper to show you, you're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch along all 4 sides. That's all you're going to do is just sew almost like an inner square using a scant 1/4 inch around the whole thing. And then I'll show you what we do after that. Okay, so here you go. You can see, let me move it up to the camera a little bit. There's my little outer edge that I sewed around all 4 sides. And the next thing you want to do is you're going to cut this in half on the diagonal 2 times. So let me get my ruler. Just going to line that up again on the diagonal 2 times. And I just go corner to corner. Now I try not to separate these. It does happen sometimes you separate them, and then I'm going to flip the ruler around. It's easier when you're not filming because you can kind of move around your table a little bit more. And again, just corner to corner. All right, and there, whoops. I missed a little spot. Let me just clip that really quickly. And get my ruler again. Just gonna line that up really quickly. That happens sometimes. Like I said, when I'm filming, I have to do weird angles sometimes. There you go. Okay, that was easy. So here are my 4 half square triangles. I'm going to press these, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this method, because there is one thing to this method that not everybody cares for, even though it gives you 4 great half square triangles. The issue that you can get when you do the 4 at a time method is you're cutting on the bias. So these edges might stretch a little bit. I'm going to try and show you. You do get stretching, and not everybody likes that. I don't have a huge problem when I'm piecing these blocks. Some people don't care for it. It's really up to you, but you definitely get much more stretching. I'm going to show you on this one again like that. You can sort of see. And then let me pull back one of those other ones. So here's one we made just 2 at a time, and you can see you do not get that same stretching. I'm pulling about the same way. So you definitely get more stretching with this method. So that's just sort of a warning. Not everybody cares for that. Some people use starch to help that out, because sometimes you just need 4 half square triangles for something, and it really is a nice, quick, and easy method. But now let me show you how to trim these down. We trim these down basically the same way we did the larger ones. And here's a smaller square ruler. Love my square rulers with diagonal lines. And so this one I wanted to do 4.5 inches unfinished. So I'm going to cut this down to 4.5 inches. And for this one, my original squares were 7.25 inches. And like with the other one, I'm going to sort of go over a little quick chart to tell you how big you need to cut your squares to get certain size half square triangles. But let me just show you quickly how I trim this one down. Again, you're going to line up that diagonal line with the diagonal line in your block. And then you're going to just trim off this top corner first. There you go. And then rotate it around. Find that in this case I'm making 4.5 inches, so you're going to find the 4.5 inch mark on that diagonal line. Make sure the bottom line, diagonal line along that seam, and the left side are lined up nice and even. And there you go. There's your nice 4.5 inch half square triangle. And this is the 4 at a time method. I'm going to quickly trim these, so these will be done. All right. So, oops, I have one little dog ear here. I'm going to trim that off. I think I need a new rotary cutter blade. I seem to have some issues here today with the cutting. You can see there's not much waste here, but there's enough for me or for anybody to have that wiggle room that'll help you out when you're cutting. So here are my 4.5 inch half square triangles. Love them. And I'm going to put those aside, and now I'm going to give you again a chart. I'm going to read off a chart that might help you out. So I'm going to tell you what you need to cut for your unfinished size. So keeping in mind, again, these are all unfinished measurements. If you want 4 1.5 inch half square triangles, you need to cut 2 squares 2.5 inches. For 2 inch unfinished, you need 2 squares cut 3.5 inches. For 2.5 inch unfinished, you need 2 squares cut 4.25. For 3 inch, you need 5 inch. For 3 inch unfinished, you need 5 inch squares. For 3.5 inch unfinished, you need 5 3/4. For 4 inch unfinished, you need 6.5 inch squares. For 4.5, which is the one we just did, you need 7.25 inch squares. For 5 inch unfinished half square triangles, you need to cut 2 8 inch squares. For 5.5 inch unfinished half square triangles, you need to cut 2 8 3/4 inch squares. For 6 inch unfinished, you need 2 9.5 inch two 9.5 inch squares. Cut them. And for 2 6.5 inch unfinished half square triangles, you need to cut 2 squares 10.25 inches. So the last method I'm going to show you is making half square triangles 8 at a time. And this is really handy if you have a lot to make. In fact, I'm writing a quilt pattern right now where I use a lot of half square triangles, and I'm definitely going to use this method because each block has, they're all divisible by 8. So this is actually ideal for my quilt pattern. In this case, I am looking for 2.5 inch unfinished half square triangles. So these squares are going to make 8 of those. So to get that with this method, you need to cut a square that is 6 inches square. So this is my 6-inch square. Again, I'm still using that gorgeous fabric I picked up at Whatnot. Isn't that pretty, those matching? So now I'm going to draw, on this case for the 8 at a time, you're going to draw a diagonal line on both corners, so 2 times. And I'm going to use my water. Last time I used that white pencil for the other method. I'm going to try it with this. Maybe this will show up. This is just a water-soluble marker. Just corner to corner. Let's see how this turns out. Hopefully, you probably cannot see that at all. I know I can see it, but let me find a different marker for that. All right, we're going to try the white again, just so you can see it better. Sorry about that. That probably isn't much better, is it? There you can kind of see it. Let me see. Try it on this side. Okay, so I drew my X. There you can see it a little bit better. There's my X. Okay, so you can see, let's see, maybe move this back a little bit. Sorry about that. There's my X. You can't see, there's the one where I used the blue water soluble, which definitely faded into this block. Basically, what you're going to do now that you have your X is you are going to sew, kind of like we did on the 2.5 inch, the 2 at a time method. You're going to sew a 1/4 inch down each of your side of your lines on both sides. So you're going to make like a double X. So basically along here, you're going to do 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side, on this side, and this side. So you do that. Basically, you're going to have 4 X's or 2 big X's. It's hard to explain. It's easier if you see it. Sometimes it's harder to explain than to just see it visually. At least for me, I'm a visual learner. So I'm going to go do that at my machine right now. And remember, you always want to use that scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so here it is. I've sewn down both of those sides. You can see, I'm going to hold it just a little bit closer. You can see how you have that sort of double X there. The first thing you want to do, and this is for all of the trimming, this is the trickiest one, in my opinion. So basically what I'm going to do is the first thing you want to do is cut square lines. I didn't draw them on here, but that's where your ruler is going to come in really handy here. So I'm going to use my smaller ruler only because it just fits better and it's easier. You are going to line up, you're going to put this edge, your right edge of your ruler, on that center point right here. And then you're going to make sure that you're lined up on this edge and along the bottom. I cannot live without my square rulers. I don't think I could quilt without them. I'm sure I could, because when I first started I didn't have any materials, but it just makes life so much easier. And take your time here, because you don't want to have to do it again, especially if you don't have a ton of fabric. So I think that's good. And then you're going to cut down, you're just going to cut, basically, you can also line it up, with those crisscrosses. As long as you sewed nice and accurately, you can line them up with those crisscrosses too, although I like to line them up the other way. Slice it down the middle, and then you're going to do the same this way. And I'm going to line it up along here and then along the edge. The ruler, hold on, I'm going to move a little bit. The ruler is definitely your friend, and then line it up right there on that point. And you're going to cut right across. All right, there you go. So now you have 4 squares, and you still need to cut one more time. And then you're just going to take your ruler, and on the drawn line, that one part of that X that we drew earlier, you are just going to slice this in half, kind of like you did with the 2 at a time. And there you go. There's your half square triangles. Again, they still need to be trimmed down. So I'm going to just do these really quickly and then press them. Alrighty, here are all 8 of my half square triangles. We did that in one shot, very easy to do. I really like this method. Again, I used to always just use the 2.5 inch method, and that's the method I teach when I do my lecture called Happiness is a Half Square Triangle. But man, if you need a lot of half square triangles, this is a great way to do it. So now I'm just going to show you quickly how to trim this one down. It's basically the same. I'm going to adjust the camera a little bit because this is smaller. We're aiming for 2.5 inch half square triangles with this one. So again, it's basically you're cutting it the exact same way you do all the others. Just line up and do that first initial cut on the corner. And these all have nice wiggle room. Rotate it around. You're going to find your 2.5 inch mark in this case. So there's my diagonal line, left, bottom. Hold it in place. And there you have your perfect 2.5 inch square, half square triangle. Alrighty, so here are all of my half square triangles doing the 8 at a time method. Love this method. And I should have said this earlier. If you want more wiggle room than I'm giving you with these measurements, just cut your squares a little bit bigger. Maybe add on 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch to the size of the square that you cut. That will give you more wiggle room. If you're more comfortable like I am, like I said with my 2 at a time method, I add 3/4 of an inch just because it helps my hand. So, you can always make your squares bigger. Just know that you'll use up a little bit more fabric. All right, so here are the measurements for the 8 at a time method for half square triangles, and you'll get 8 of these. So if you want unfinished half square triangles that are 1.5 inches square, you need to cut 2 squares, cut 4 inches. For 2 inch half square triangles, you need 2 5-inch squares. For 2.5 inch unfinished half square triangles, you need 2 6-inch squares. That's the ones we just did. For 3 inch unfinished, you need 2 7-inch squares. For 3.5 inch unfinished, you need 8 to cut 2 8-inch squares. For 4 inch unfinished, you need 2 9-inch squares. For 4.5 inch unfinished, you need 2 10-inch squares. For 5 inch unfinished, you need 11-inch squares, 2 of them. 5.5 unfinished, you need 12-inch squares. 6 inches unfinished, you need 13-inch squares, and 6.5 inches unfinished, you need 14 squares, 2 of them, and that will give you 8 of each of those sizes. So here again are the half square triangles I made. Here's the ones I made 2 at a time method. Here are the ones I made 4 at a time method. Again, keeping in mind that this method, you'll get it a little bit stretchier than other methods, and so that's not everybody's favorite method, but it is a nice way. I'm making a scrap quilt right now actually using this method just because I want to use up some of my scraps. I have a lot of scraps. And then here's the 8 I got from the 8 at a time method. I'm actually going to sew these together and make just a cute little table topper real quickly because what I did is I cut them so there's 2.5 inches, 4.5 inches, and 8.5 inches. So it's that'll fit nicely together. This is, again, just some of the fabric I got in my haul over on Whatnot. I am now selling over there, and of course I'm shopping too, and they were generous enough to give me some money to go shopping, and I'm going to be doing a haul video. Love this fabric. It's so pretty. Look at that pretty mint green, and then this fun sort of industrial, or I guess like street scene photo with some pink in it, some rose, some beige, and then that same sort of mint green. I love the way that came together. You ought to check that out. I do have a referral link. You can get $15 credit towards your first purchase, which is pretty nice. And you can also sell if you have a lot of stash busting to do, or if you have just quilts you make or other little things you sew, or whatever you do. You can sell over there too. They have great clothing items. I mean, they have like everything over there you can imagine when you want to go shopping, and some really great deals, especially, well, for me, especially on fabric. I love buying fabric. So there you go. There's my 3 different methods for making half square triangles, my all-time favorite unit in quilting. I think it always will be. It's so versatile. You use it in so many ways. I even do a talk about it to guilds and shops and things. So thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.